Everyone. I hope you are all well. Welcome to the Hall of Fame organized by Femme, Uganda. My name is Esther Awor. I am a lawyer at Femme, Uganda. And with me today, I have a special guest called Turiho Danita. She's a lawyer too, and she'll introduce herself. And we are going to have a very interesting conversation about the topic breaking barriers. And some of you may ask, what? Reproductive health and justice and abortion. This is a very sensitive topic for most people. And that is why we've decided to remove it from the corridor talks to talking about it right now with you listening in. But also, feel free to share your opinions and your ideas as well in regards to the same. And this information is going to legal practitioners, medical workers, the general public, really, because this is a matter that affects everybody and especially women. And so, to pull us off why we are having this in the first place, the objective is to amplify the voices of very many women that are suffering with abortion and SRH issues, sexual reproductive health and rights, but also to document some of the legal strategies that should come up from this discussion. So starting off, Danita here will introduce herself, but also tell us a little bit more about reproductive justice and abortion from a legal perspective for our audience that have no legal background.
Okay, then, thank you so much, Esther. It is a delight to be here and to engage in this conversation. Like you said, it's extremely sensitive, but it's also extremely pertinent for ourselves and for the general public. It's an issue that has been largely stigmatized, but stigma doesn't make it go away. My name is Turiho Danita, like Esther introduced. I am a lawyer and I currently work with Uganda Women's Network. So it's a delight to be here and to share on this. Diving straight into the conversation that you had mentioned, basically what reproductive justice is. People often hear that and think abortion, but reproductive justice extends beyond just abortion or access to abortion or access to contraceptives. It is a whole system, a system that it looks at the full spectrum that makes it possible for an individual to access um to access I'm struggling to phrase this in the right way, to access safe and
Mm.
equitable conditions to make their reproductive decisions, right? It encompasses, constitutional and human rights law. It encompasses, but these all trickle down, right? They all trickle down to our daily
Sentences,
circumstances.
yes.
Yes, so when we talk about reproductive justice, we're talking about the systems that are in place, systems hinged on equality that is recognized and practiced, that make it possible for individuals to go out there and say, I want this for myself, and I am informed enough to make this decision for myself. And the situation, there's access to whatever service I want to partake in, whether it's medical, whether it's legal, or social. And society recognizes that this is my right and I ought to exercise this right. It's a system that holds governments accountable to not just refrain from negatively interfering with these reproductive rights, but to actually take the extra step to make them a reality in the different conditions across the board. So when we look at reproductive justice, we're looking at something that affects everyone in the full scope of humanity, and we're looking at something that makes it possible for individuals to have a holistic lifestyle in regards to their reproductive health.
Okay. Thank you so much, Danita, for such an elaborative explanation. And some people may wonder and ask, okay, what is then Uganda's stand when it comes to reproductive justice and health and this whole abortion thing? Very many conversations behind there saying, oh, but aren't we party to international conventions or declarations that hold us accountable to holding what abortion or reproductive justice is? For example, the Maputo Protocol, and it's explicit that Uganda reserved just Article 14 of that particular protocol in terms of reproductive justice and health, that also encompasses abortion when it comes to incidences of rape, assault, defilement, and such kind of things. So, what would then be the legal framework that Uganda has when it comes to reproductive health and justice?
Okay, thank you, Esther. Like I said earlier, reproductive health isn't just limited to, there's no one right that you'll say the right to reproductive health. Though that would be convenient, there is no that one right. What it is, it's a set of rights. It's something that is hinged on a set of rights, right? You have the right to life. You would have the right to, human dignity, freedom from torture. That's one of them. You have the rights of women. We say women in particular because women are disproportionately affected by reproductive injustice. You would also have the right to access to emergency medical treatment. That's, I believe, under Article 34. And then you also have, and the right to life is in two-way in regards to reproductive health. It's the right of the mother, um, and then it's also the right of her unborn child. So according to Ugandan law, the people should do have a right to life, to exist, but in regards to unborn children, mothers are not allowed to procure an abortion unless it is by a medical professional. It is established that this is a threat to their life, and this is the constitution. This is what the constitution states. But when you trickle down to our statutory law, when you trickle down to like the penal code, for instance, this is not reflected. You have the penal code state that it is illegal for you to procure an abortion. You would say have the penal code say that it is illegal to assist a mother as a medical professional to access an abortion. You also, none of this reflects the whole stance of unless the mother's life is at risk. It's not reflected anywhere. So you find medical professionals are backed into a corner. You can tell that there's too much uncertainty, so there's obviously need to reform that in regards to our legal stance. But have a medical professional who is backed into a corner. It is clear that what the mother needs this abortion, and it is a threat to their life. And but as a medical professional, you fear that, oh, you're going to be imprisoned, you're going to lose your license, you're going there's so many, so obviously it's a conundrum in that regard. But then you also switch to another dimension of Uganda's legal stance, and that's the international legal framework. So in particular, I'm going to speak of the Maputo Protocol, which is what you spoke of. The Maputo Protocol is essentially a legal framework to which Uganda is party to. Uganda ratified this, I believe, in 2010, though the Montreal Protocol was established in 2003. It speaks in particular to the rights of women under the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. So it's a protocol that speaks particularly to the rights of women because the rights of women was seen as something that was especially relevant to address. So under this, Uganda ratified this with a reservation towards Article 14. So what is Article 14? Article 14 essentially speaks of reproductive health rights in regards to women. It speaks of a woman being able to decide the number of children she wants to have and to take such steps to make sure she doesn't have a number that exceeds the one she wants, or she has the exact number. It speaks to, in particular, I think this is what set our Ugandan parties off, the
Mm-hmm.
right to access abortions, to
Mm-hmm.
procure abortions as an
Mm-hmm.
individual, to make the choice.
Mm-hmm.
The African Charter is simply saying, my body, my choice, or her body, her choice. And this was something that the Ugandan government found was not something that they wanted to be immediately party to. So right now we are stuck in a place where we recognize that a woman ought to live, but we're not recognizing the full scope in which she ought to live, in a place where she's able to make choices, in a place where she's able to access services that are life saving, but also life saving doesn't encapsulate, just and I think we also need to have this conversation. It doesn't encapsulate just the health aspect of it all. Can this person afford this child? Can their mental health, because there's a mental health aspect to having a baby, to being pregnant and having a child. Was this child gotten through, when we speak of, just to backtrack, Article 14 speaks of abortion in certain circumstances, right? It speaks of it in regards to rape, defilement, incest, and yet those are very realistic. Those are very very realistic places to come from when you say someone ought to have an abortion. if from an individual point of view, I'm not certain that. Anyways, let me just leave that conversation.
Mhm.
But I think if I were ever in that place, I would want the ability to say that this is a pregnancy I've gotten through a very traumatic incident. I ought to be able to say no or yes to it, because that right was initially taken away from me. But this is not something that is recognized in Uganda. So when we say the right to life of a woman, is it only you existing without the ability to say no or yes, especially when that ability was taken away from you in the first place, in the case that you were sexually assaulted and whatnot. So Uganda's stance is one that is very conservative. It is one that is very conventional. It's one that has not moved away from viewing women as simply parties to a system. It hasn't brought them to the table fully. And I think we really need to think more on this and work further in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Danita. You see, we have incidences of of people being arrested for post-abortion care. You have cases or scenarios where women go to the hospital, especially from the rural areas, and she has probably been raped, given the examples that Danita has highlighted, the rape, the assault, and the defilement that has gone on, and somebody probably miscarriages this child. Would that also then become an abortion when a miscarriage happens?
Post abortive care?
Yes. Now, when that happens, those are two questions, right? So the first one being that, will the miscarriage then amount to an abortion? And if this person is taken to a health facility, will they be treated as a person that has procured an abortion? But are they also going to be able to be given post abortion care in terms of what they have gone through? Because the fetus or whatever is inside her has come out, may not be by her will, but in Uganda, the policy in regards to post-abortion care is not very, very clear. So, would you really like to help us internalize that?
Yes, yes. So, in regards to post abortive care, I think that we need to be clear on that. Even in Uganda, post abortive care, when you look at it right, it is not illegal. It's actually a right someone ought to have, the right to be able to access medical health care, especially emergency medical health care. But circling back to your initial topic, that was a miscarriage. So, miscarriage in and of itself is not an abortion. Um, the basic principle of an abortion is that there was some external sort of entity, whether it be by choice or you've been poisoned or whatnot, or you've taken a substance, whether of your will or not, that would help evacuate the fetus, right? An abortion, a miscarriage rather, is maybe it's stress or something of that sort that has pushed you to that circumstance. So there's a difference between a miscarriage and abortion, and an abortion, and legally it is recognized that an abortion is different from a miscarriage. And then moving on to post-abortive care, post-abortive care is not in itself illegal, though some do believe that it is illegal, and it affects the way they give people services, right? So a medical professional might believe that it is illegal for them to help a lady who has clearly gone ahead to have an abortion, access, maybe she's bleeding at this point, or maybe she's going through whatever it is at that stage, access the right medical services, right? But when you look at it from the angle of the law, it is, or rightly should be, a legal right. It comes down to your right to life. Your right to life is hinged off of you being able to access certain services and whatnot. But there is a misconception. There is a misconception around post-abortive care, and if one ought to provide it. We've also had cases of individuals reporting mothers who have come to them in pursuit of this post-abortive care that we speak of. So they go ahead and not just reject this mother, but go ahead to transfer them to the police and whatnot. And this has driven the situation around abortion more underground, because make no mistake, abortion will continue happening. It is continuing to happen, but it's going to continue. It continues to happen underground. So things, when we say underground, we mean people are procuring the services, but they're procuring them from very questionable spaces, from very questionable individuals, in very questionable circumstances, and even the post-abortive care that they're seeking is in those extremely shady avenues. And they, the fear often leads to worst case scenario death. Sometimes someone will fully lose their reproductive ability. Someone's I speak greatly of mental health because that's something I'm passionate about, but it's a very traumatic incident. And so whilst post-abortive care in itself is not illegal, there is a great misconception around, even you would go and have this conversation around with legal professionals and people who are in the space of justice, who I would say the police themselves, because they do entertain such cases. They do entertain such cases. The whole aspect of someone seeking post-abortive care has been one that has been utilized for individuals to be able um, to be headhunted for procuring those services. So there are a number of misconceptions around it that need to be addressed on a holistic level. We need This is a conversation that we need to have more emphatically going forward. But it is not in essence illegal. It comes down to, does this person have the right to live? What does that right to live mean? Do they have the right to access proper health care? That's in my opinion, that's what it comes down to.
All right, thank you so much, Danita. And you see, that's a very pertinent thing to understand, because more often times we're saying, like, in Uganda, they say, "Oh, abortion is illegal," but the question then is post-abortion care legal? Because now, if we are trickling it down to the provisions of probably the Constitution or the Penal Code, it's not explicitly written. It's hidden under inhumane, degrading treatment. It's hidden under the right to life. It's hidden under the right to health. But now, in instances where somebody leaves their homes, and let's say this lady has carried out abortion and needs assistance from a medical doctor and says, "So, hey, I carried out an abortion, but I need post abortion care." Do you think that the facilities then in Uganda are receptive towards women that need or require post abortion care? Do you think that, in as much as we agree that this may fall within the ambit of right to life, right to receive medical attention, it is actually being appreciated?
Thank you for the question, Esther. I do have to commend, especially the medical professionals, because they really really deal with a lot, and there are some really great medical practitioners that go ahead to do this, to provide this service to them. But I think on a larger basis, when you take into account the conservative nature of this country, but beyond that, the way the under education, I would say, of individuals across the board on the legalities of these matters. Because I've been talking a lot about how we need to be more deliberate about educating, especially medical professionals, on the rights that are involved in that field, and particularly sexual and reproductive health rights, and what they encompass, what they should do, and what they ought not to do. Because in the end, these are the first points of contact that these individuals will have. If it's not the police, it will be the especially when we're speaking of post-abortive care, then it would be the medical professionals. And it is at that stage that it is decided what that person's experience will be like across the aisle. At the very least, how receptive they are of the system going forward. If I come to a clinic or a hospital and I am receiving and I want to procure post-abortive care, and first of all, I can see the doctor or the nurse close off. I can see the judgment on their faces. I can see them calculating where I ought to stand, and then in some cases, I can be turned away. Then
Mm,
it does influence how I go ahead and interface with the system. Do I go to police anymore? Why would I? From my first point of contact, I had a problem. Do I look to pursuing things in the courts of justice?
Mm.
Why would I? At my
Mm.
first point of
Mm.
contact, I had a really negative experience. I think the medical professionals are doing a really commendable job, all things considered. I think we can equip them better. We can help them a bit more to do better than they already are. I do not want to turn this into a blame game and say, because how can you expect someone to do better when we have not invested enough in educating them on what better is and how better looks like, and we haven't set up the right systems. We have systems in place, we have policies in place. I will commend Uganda on that, but the implementation of those policies and those processes and everything of that sort is just horrible. It's just proper horrible. I think the system can be better. It can definitely be better.
Okay. Speaking of the system being better and the laws that we have in place, what reforms legally do you think that Uganda can come up with in regards to abortion and reproductive health and rights?
Okay, thank you for that, Esther. I think going forward, we need some clarity. We need our statutory laws to first of all mirror what our constitutional laws say. While the constitution is the grand norm, she's on top, she's the girl. Um, it needs to be reflected with the other. It needs to be reflected wholly within the legal system, because this gives room for unnecessary legal questions that could be um, that could be resolved if we just went ahead to make sure that everything in regards to these questions are aligned from the constitution. Everything trickles down. So we need some sort of legal reform first of all to have that mirrored, and I think we need to have a more concrete and holistic discussion, as not just for the policymakers but as a society as a whole, in regards to our, I don't say just abortion rights, sexual and reproductive health rights, because the laws always mirror society. Laws always mirror, how well educated the society is. They always mirror the demands of the people, or often they mirror the demands of the people. And we also need to, I think, be a bit more empathetic in our pursuits of the law. But right, this was a question directly related to the legal aspect of it all. In regards to the legal aspect, first of all, I think the most important thing, like I said earlier, was to have everything aligned legally, and to we need to make it so people know these things, because they can be existent, but people might not know them. And then the next step is we really need to consider our reservation in regards to Article 14, because when you really look at it, how on average, how many cases do we have? 12,000 plus cases of rape and whatnot each year, and those are the reported cases. Think maybe a few thousand more if we're lucky. So if 12,000 plus people are being sexually assaulted each year, a majority of whom are women, and let's say a percentage of these happen to get pregnant, and they are not able to access these services, in particular abortion, from such a traumatic experience, we are doing a disservice to a horrible portion of our society. At the very least, if we cannot say abortion is legal entirely, we can say for traumatic cases, for things like incest, for things like rape and defilement, we can do our people a service by giving them the right to access this.
Okay. I'll start with the fact that you stated that we should follow what the Constitution says. But you see, even with our Constitution, which hints on to the right to life in Article 22, in clause 2 of that article, it speaks about abortion when it comes to saving the life of the mother, which really trickles down to the penal code under section 207 of cap 128, which then accepts or permits a medical officer to procure an abortion when it comes to saving the life of the mother. So when it comes to following what the constitution says ideally, then the law a little bit to some extent makes sense, right? But then, given the contradictions, then that the constitution may portray in terms of degrading inhuman treatment, and then when it comes to mental health, right? When it comes to then the reproductive rights that we are talking to. So, what then I want the people out there to understand is that in as much as we are having the conversation about reproductive health and justice and abortion, is there some hope for Ugandans out there that are looking at this as abortion or reproductive health as a misconception, or even policymakers that are very stringent on this whole abortion thing, or even healthcare practitioners who fear this entire conversation?
I think the hope comes from ourselves. I think it just trickles down to that. The hope comes from ourselves. A lot of Uganda's legal reform has come from the needs of the people. If the constitution we have right now is a reflection, or at least at its inception, it was a reflection of the needs of the people. We have had decisions being made because they reflect what society wants, and this is especially pertinent to decisions that are not so high standing, right? What I mean to say is that when we speak of, a hope or whatnot, it should come from a place of, first of all, it will come from a place of, first of all, educating ourselves, educating the rest of society, and making sure that people understand what exactly is being asked for. Do you yourself understand what exactly is being asked for?
Do I understand what is being asked for?
I mean, I think it's a personal question.
Uh huh.
Think of it of,
Uh huh.
do we understand exactly what we're asking for and why we're
Mhm.
asking for it?
Mhm.
Do we have empathy enough to?
Yeah, I think that generally people know what they're asking for. They're asking for the rights to abort. They're asking for the legalities to be transformed in terms of reproductive health and rights. Because recently we were reviewing cases, and you see scenarios where girls have been defiled, and when it comes to an abortion it becomes a challenge. So all we are asking for is, in terms of, if these girls who have been defiled, raped, women who have been raped, go to the healthcare facility and ask for a post-abortion care, but also ask for abortion, are they rightly doing so? Because right now what's happening is people in the villages, or in even the town women here in schools, people just go use hooks, hangers, and all these dangerous objects to procure the abortion, because they fear that even if they went to the health facility, they're not going to get the assistance that they deserve in terms of the health that we are talking about.
Okay, I think that is exactly right. I also think to humanize, we need to, as legal professionals, humanize the conversation more, because we sit together and we speak of these rights, we speak of constitutional provisions and statutory provisions and everything, but I don't think it touches particularly on the pain points of the person out there. We need to humanize the conversation more and give people, take it away from the legal language, is what I'm trying to say. Take it away from the conversation of, um okay, this is what the court case that did, because it goes ahead to, um people are left people are left out of such discussions, and we don't want people to be left out. We want everyone to be brought into the table. So when we are discussing such matters, we ought to consider our language first of all, and have it to, as some that reflects things that matter to people, what it means to people. Sometimes it might be a bit uncomfortable, and beyond being uncomfortable, it might seem like we are, you know so for some it might be switching up things a bit too much, but switching up things a bit too much would, I think, be necessary in this context. So, when I say, do we understand what we're asking for, some people just don't understand, because this is the language we have utilized around it. We've utilized statutes, and we've utilized court cases, and we've utilized judgments. But what do those judgments mean? What do those statutes mean? How does it affect people? How does it touch on their pain points? how, what does it matter to them, to their daughters, to their sons, to the future generations? What does it matter now? And we need, I think that's how we ought to address this conversation, not just from an angle of, guys, this is what the law says, but the law ought to say this. No, guys, this is what the law says, and this is what it does to you and me, and this is what it could do to you and me, and this is what it could do to your brother, to your sister, to your daughter. And then from there, I think the conversation will be a bit more realistic for the majority of society. I know this is a conversation of a legal perspective, but anyway, the law is for us all.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I agree with you to a certain extent. However, when we have such discussions, like they say, the law either builds a society and builds people, or it does break some people, right? So, and what we have now, because what is the law in itself? The law is a general governing principle that people in a particular society abide by, right? For example, if you went to maybe Islamic states, what's the law you're supposed to put on? Sharia wise. And so, whether you understood Sharia or you did not understand, whether you were Christian, you had to put on Sharia clothes. Or what does the law say in terms of if somebody commits a crime, they're supposed to be arrested. So if then that person is not arrested, then more crime is promoted in that particular society. So in as much as it is important, which I agree with you that we should move away from the legalese, it's also important to actually have the legal conversations because of the policy makers that actually make this law, and that's what they are that's what they're residing on, to make these prohibitions. Because even when we talk about the genesis of abortion, when you look at Roe versus Wade, for example, what happened? Abortion was legalized. Then we look at the case of Dobbs versus Jackson, right, where then they say that no, abortion is illegal, right? And so then you're looking at United States cases trickling down to African continents and African countries, which also trickles down to individuals, right? But again, asking ourselves that why is it in the first place? We look at religion, the different things um, that people have instilled in themselves in terms of religion, in terms of what society believes what is right and what is wrong. So at the end of the day, what the major hindrance then would be is that, is this something that we can even have a conversation about? So if it is not legal, then people will even fear to have conversations about it, in terms of, okay, can then somebody in a medical hospital or even a doctor uh, talk about it, or can they even act on that way? Because most people, as we're having this discussion, fear to have conversations on the same thing at the medical level. They do not want to involve themselves or associate themselves with such kind of topics or even conversations. So again, what is hindering them from doing that? So I think again, those are the discussions that we should have. I realize our time is coming up to an end. Danita, could you please give us parting shots as we end this podcast? Thank you, our listeners. Keep listening.
Thank you, Esther. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you to Femfort for hosting such a an important space. Um, I think my parting shots are that we need to be kinder as a people. We really, really need to be kinder as a people. If you just think of it much further than the surface, this all comes down to how kinder you are as a person, especially in regards to the asks we have had in this context. The asks are simple. If I am raped, if I am defiled, if the child is going through incest, can I just have the ability to say no after that very traumatic incident? That, at least in regards to Article 14, is the full scope of the request, the ask, the demand actually. But that demand, due to very individualistic takes, has not been one that has been pursued. And so it comes down to how kinder are you as a person, and how kinder do you want to be as a person. I say as a person because these things build up. If one person, and then 10, and then 50, and then 20, and then 100, and then 1,000, and then 1 million, 10 million, 15 million understand and ask for things, then it makes sense. I know it's a bit unrealistic though to expect 10 million or 15 million, but I don't think it's unrealistic to say one or two from this discussion would have a different thought, and in the end that compounds, that proper compound. So I think that the matter is, let's be kinder as a people, and let's think of people as people who ought to have happier lives and safer lives. And then we can look at it, we can be able to pursue these conversations differently. Otherwise, thank you, Esther, and thank you to Femford for hosting me today. And I look forward to listening to many episodes of this podcast. Thanks.
Thank you, Danita, for being our wonderful guest. Sorry for this is Africa, but anyways, thank you so much for your elaborative self for helping us understand this. And I know that even the man who did not do law has understood at least a conversation. But for me, mine is really to be very optimistic because look at this. This is a feminist organization. Back in the days, women were never allowed to sit at the table, we were never allowed to have decision making. But look at how far we have come with our resilience, with pushing hard. We have a CEDAW, a whole convention on elimination of all forms of discrimination against women. So I think that with positivity and with the push that we have as women organizations, but even as feminists, that it's important for us to even move away from the discussions, from the corridor talks, and that's why we are having this one right here, to making it out there, amplify it legally, amplify it socially, amplify it in all corridors and all platforms, such that the information is out there. Thank you so much for listening to us. I have been your host, Esther Awor from Femme Forte. Please tune in to our next episode from the Hall of Fame, still organized by Femme Forte. And this can be found on Spotify, on YouTube, and please give us feedback. Thank you so much for listening in.